Hello, everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time, Persona 3 podcast where we play through Persona 3 Reload in real time along with the in-game calendar dates. Sort of this week. My name is Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathan Dornbush. Jonathan, how are you?
Tom, I barely made it through this week's game time. It was really difficult to juggle this with my real life this week, so it was rough.
Well, we are talking about, it's an extra day this week because we did one less last week. So it's from February 1st to the 8th. That's a lot.
I don't know how we're going to get through it all, but we'll try our best here.
No, we can knock it off. So yes, obviously this is the first week of, how many is it? 3?
I think it's 3 or 4.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 3 or we'll see. But point being, we've got a chunk of time where we've done this time skip in the game to March 4th, and we're going to be doing episodes each week still, but bear with us if they're a little shorter. They're not going to be talking about exactly the same format. We're going to be using this as an opportunity to go back through some of the things we'd missed, some of the social links we haven't talked about, some of the stuff that folk have asked of us, or things like doing, social link tier lists sort of things, looking back and sort of evaluating how we felt about the game in general or these different parts that we haven't talked about quite yet. So, to that end, today we are going to be talking about Yukari, Hayase, and Yuko's max rank social links and sort of talking about those characters, what we think of them, what we thought of their stories, that sort of stuff. And forgive us if these episodes are not all an hour and a half long.
What about well, we'll make up for it when we do a ranking of every single persona.
Yeah, exactly.
That one will be about 8 hours.
Every single one. I feel like this game, compared to my playthrough of P5, I really didn't do a good job of keeping up with getting new things. I felt like I was getting theurgies later than usual. I think I missed at least one wholesale. There were a couple times where it would be like Elizabeth would ask for a persona and then I would go and look up how to make it and I would be missing 2 different personas that I hadn't done. I don't know, it just was less fastidious, I guess, this time with that crafting stuff.
That's fair. I do think obviously it's more simplified to a certain degree than 5, just in terms of like the approach to everything here. So it almost feels like once you're on rails and you're doing well, like maybe just in a mental place subconsciously of like, well, I don't need to worry too much. On my first playthrough, I definitely had a bit of a stride where I was not collecting new persona for dozens of floors. And that's probably a little embarrassing to say, but I was like, I'm doing well. I don't need new ones. So yeah, it happens.
Anyway, before we jump into the thrilling week, we want to do our confidant call out. These are the people who are over at patreon.com/takeyourtime who have been supporting us so graciously at the Palace Ruler tier, that highest tier over there. And those folk are Bob and Tim64, Brody S, Cameron C, Claudia R, Dallas, Damon, Dan, Danimal Lover, Default Titus, Dexter, Caitlin E, Keegan H, Mad Attack, Michael V, P King, Programmer Sid, Sam K, Sarah M, Shade, Something Witty, Willy Wang Wang, and Zachary L. We appreciate all of you very, very, very much. And once again, if you didn't hear from last episode, you can go back with the full details are at the beginning of the previous episode if you missed it for whatever reason. But we are going to be pausing the Patreon once the quote-unquote final episode lands on the 4th. I think we're posting it on the 4th or 5th. Anyway, whenever that lands around then, that final episode, we're going to be pausing the Patreon. So we really do appreciate all of those people who have supported over there this entire time or just fresh, whenever you came in. Thank you very much for it. And yeah, let's move on to the pop quiz from last week. This will be the last pop quiz until we get to actual dates again. I am going to do one for the final thing, but also there's no game. There's no game.
You could just make it up. What was Junpei doing on February 6th?
What was Edogawa's longest lecture by word count?
Oh boy. Hey, if anyone knows the answers to that, you really should probably get outside for a little bit.
I think it must, the actual answer
The
must
tarot.
be the tarot one.
Yeah.
The tarot one just goes.
I've got to imagine that's the one. Yeah.
But last week, I asked, what is the name of the final ability that you use to defeat Nyx's core? And as a bonus, what is the name of the quote-unquote persona that you use to cast it? Did we get anybody writing in?
So I believe we've got quite a few right answers on the name of the attack. Persona itself, maybe a couple others, but we'll see. The answer, of course, being Great Seal.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. I like this flavor too, because you are not defeating death. Even with the almighty power of the universe tarot, you don't kill death. You just seal Nyx away again.
A nice little just a little rubber stamp. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Tape it over the box. Do not open, and just leave it be. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Alex, Sable, programmer Sid all got that one over on the Patreon. We also had Bob and Tim over on YouTube get it. Plenty of people were getting it, so apologies if I'm missing anyone, but we had a lot of people
I'm
writing
glad.
in, which was great.
Makes
to
me
see.
happy. Makes me happy to have people paying attention to that one, because I
Yeah.
love the little flavor of that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need a name.
Yeah.
But the fact that they did it is
And
good.
in terms of the persona, we have a couple different answers, so I'm not actually sure what's correct because I'm forgetting. Programmer Sid wrote in that they think the persona was just called Universe.
That is the correct answer.
Okay. Sable also wrote in and thought it might just be whichever one you had out last when you're fighting Nyx, but which
That
is a
would be very
reasonable
funny.
guess. But
But then it could also be like Belphegor or whatever.
at least they don't have was it the penis in the wheelchair guy from P5?
Oh yeah, well
Yeah.
it was a chariot. You know,
Yeah.
it was-
Is Belphegor the demon on the toilet?
I believe so.
Okay, he's my favorite guy. Yeah, he's great. When you summon him
Can
and
you
he's just
imagine-
really big in the sky. It's like,
Can you imagine if that was the case and it did just show up in that final fight when you use Great Seal?
you almost wonder if that's maybe why it is so set specifically, because they're like, we can't have Toilet Man showing up here.
Yeah.
Oh, that would smell so bad in that final fight. Anyway, but yeah, no, thank you we had a bunch of answers, so thank you to everyone who wrote in with those. Much appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to be pedantic about it, I don't technically, like, Universe, I don't know if it is actually a persona necessarily.
Sure.
It's just that you press triangle to pull up, that's the persona button, and then it says Universe at the top where it would normally say the persona name.
When we know we got the tarot at least, so there was that. Yeah. But yeah, appreciate everyone writing in.
Great. We also got a comment that you wanted to read out. Jonathan, isn't that correct?
Yes, we have a lot of questions and comments for a little bit after the social links, but wanted to read this one up top just because it was very sweet and very much appreciated. So Sarah M. over on the Patreon wrote, sidebar, I just wanted to share again what a delight this show is. I love that it's on Monday too, because every Sunday night I'm like, hell yeah, take your time is tomorrow, instead of having Sunday scaries. You two have definitely earned a break, though, and look forward to whatever we all play next. They've got their P4 limited run games Switch copy ready to go if and when we ever cover that. Which appreciate Sarah M and appreciate everyone. I definitely, obviously, saw an uptick and very much appreciated of just kind responses about the show this week, especially over on YouTube as well. So thank you to everyone who's just been showing love for the show. We love doing it, and breaks are helpful for the soul and the spirit, so we do appreciate everyone's understanding there. But yeah,
Indeed. Yeah, thank you very much. That's very, very sweet.
yeah,
And sort of before we jump into these social links that we wanted to talk about, I also just wanted to take a minute and do sort of a look back-ish vibe check, for lack of a better way of putting it. We talked about this. We talked a lot about the end of the game last week. We talked a lot about the actual fight, the conversations around it. What we didn't really talk about, and I don't want to jump too much into this because we are going to be talking about this more when the game actually rolls credits in a few weeks. Stuff could still happen. Jonathan, you talked about how I should probably finish it. I talked to our coworker and fellow Persona freak, Michael Higgum, about how I was talking to him about like the answer and how we weren't sure, or I wasn't sure what it was going to look like or whatever. And he was like, well, after you actually beat the game, you'll know what what that is going to look like, sort of. And I was like, I guess there's going to be more happening than maybe I was assuming. It's just like everybody going, we did it, and it ended.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually saw him in between these two episodes. And so I told him about your brave decision to hold off, because I know how big a fan he is of these, the series in this game in particular. So it was a fun, just like, oh boy, another reaction of, oh boy.
Yeah. No, so my point being, I don't want to do the whole because I don't want to be like, it ended funny and then there'd be another hour of the game. That would be stupid. But I do want to look back. Jonathan.
Yes.
We sort of beat Persona.
Sort of.
How did you feel about this?
I will feel very different when we've beaten it, but it's without spoiling anything, my feelings about this game are pretty intrinsically tied to the finale of the game, inclusive of what you have not played.
Wild.
So
makes me so curious.
It's hard to say too much there in terms of things, but I will say I think I appreciate how I'm feeling after this second run in particular. In terms of the variability of things, I will say I was impressed with myself how much I actually got to see on my first run, because I do feel like, with P5, we were replaying it for the show, and I did see a ton of stuff I didn't interact with or was new to me, or a lot more social links and things, the confidants there that I was able to see that I didn't finish in the main game. And then obviously we had the Royal DLC. Here on the second way through, had seen most of everything. I did feel like it was actually pretty manageable to do that. So I guess in some way it did lessen the replay experience to a degree.
Sure.
But I think for me, it made me appreciate more so, I think, the way this game really is its theme and exploration of those themes at every level. Like I think what this let me appreciate was just how much the concept of exploring death and grief and the reasons for living and those sort of lofty ideals, the way that it is really built into even some of the side characters that I didn't really think about it that first time around. And granted, some of that actually is because of this show. I think we've, read a few comments about maybe some storylines or characters that you and I weren't particularly a huge fan of, but then, people would offer their takes, and I realized, I was missing that there totally fairly. And to see how much it does all of that, I was really impressed by it, that I think that holds up as well as it does, for especially knowing how much of this game was made 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
rambling a bit there, but yeah.
No. It is really cool how many things tie into things, and even obvious things become, I don't know what the right way to put this is. Like Tanaka or Kamiki?
The boy who dies?
The one who, that one is obviously all about death and dealing with death and confronting death and death being inevitable and all of this stuff. But you can go back and you can sort of find connections in other things that are also very much about that, but not so, varying degrees of hitting the nail on the head and sort of being blunt about it. Oh gosh, why am I blanking on every name now? The monk.
Oh, yes. The one guy whose name I often blank on, so it's very funny that you have thrown to me for him, because I am now blanking, because this is where our brains are.
Anyway.
He
like, his is all about, it's not about
Mutatsu.
Death. Mutatsu,
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not about death specifically. It's about losing something and losing a part of himself and sort of hiding from that and then trying to get that sort of thing back. Or, you don't realize as much that Suimitsu is so, it's all like his character is obnoxious, and then you realize, oh, it is all in the context of he's behaving this way because of loss.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of connections like that where you can sort of tie it back in different, again, in varying degrees of some are right in your face and some are really not, but they all follow that same theme. And I think that is the most impressive thing to me about this. I think the character work in this game is on the whole really, really good.
Yeah.
If someone can tell me why Tanaka exists, I would appreciate it. That one I haven't found the connection for yet.
So fun fact, I got served, I really wish I should have saved it, so I apologize to the creator who put this up, but I got served a TikTok about Persona 3 originally. I think apparently he had been a daytime confidant. So he was just
Okay.
one of the other confidants at that point. But what's wild about him is there is this weird glitch, essentially, specifically, I think in the FES version, the FES sort of, royal version, where if you've not started him by the end of the game on that final day on January 31st, for some reason it lets you hang out with him that day, and then it just skips to the end of the game. You can essentially skip that part weirdly. So he's in a very weird space in general as it is. I just thought that fun fact was very silly, but yeah, he's definitely probably the biggest outlier for me because he doesn't change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how they wrap this up. Honestly, hearing you talk about how important it is and all of that stuff makes me even more glad that I didn't play it already.
Yeah.
Because if it was just sort of like a wrap-up thing, I'd be like, why haven't I done this yet? But the fact that it actually is a thing is cool. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, what I'll say is, like, without spoiling it too much, because I don't want to overblow it, like, this was not, I would say, I really love this ending. I don't think it's, like, the greatest ending of a video game ever I've ever seen. Oh my god, I'm not there with it, but I do think it so brings together what does work for the game for me so well. And especially because when it ended, I was very emotional and I didn't know how I felt about it, and I liked it for that. And then I kept thinking about it every day for the week after of what I was wrestling with there and what I liked and what I didn't like and what it meant and all the, the intentions of that ending. So that's why I really have a fondness for it, because it made me reckon with it in a way a lot of game endings don't.
Cool.
But yeah, anyway, also just before we wrap up that, go, obviously you'll have a little bit of time, but go everywhere you can, I'll say, for the ending. You essentially get a chance to explore the whole town. I really recommend you do that. Not just you, Tom, but anyone out there listening who's playing along for the first time. If you care about even a few of these side characters, it's worth just going wherever you can. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad we took a moment just to look back, because I did really, really enjoy this game. Good. And, I think obviously I want to finish it too, but the question of where I would compare it to Persona 5 is an interesting one in my head, and one I think I'm going to be thinking about, because I think, we talked a little while ago about how I did the Valkyria Chronicles comparison, I think, where like 1 and 4 are better and worse in different ways, and so they become sort of flat in my head. And similarly, like, I think I liked the overarching story of 5 better than this one's overarching story, but I think that this game did character arcs and development and specific character moments better than 5 did, right?
I can see
the
that,
story,
yeah.
So it's not like I can just be like, this one had the better story and this one had the better gameplay. Even like, I think that they are very the story specific stuff and the character specific stuff is very interesting to me in terms of like. And also, I think P3 had higher highs and lower lows in a lot of ways, because like the only character I can really think of in 5 that I actively didn't care about was the I can't remember his name. I'm blanking on every
politician.
name. The politician guy.
Yeah.
Because even like Shinya, who I like didn't really like love, he's still a character. Like, that's still an interesting little story, and it's told well. Whereas this game, I feel like, had characters I absolutely like loved their growth, loved where they went, loved who they were and how they changed. And then also characters like Tanaka, where I was like, this shouldn't be in the game. Like I didn't think of that for the politician, right? He was sort of superfluous, but at least he still told a story that was
gives
sort
you
of
such a great
story.
ability too.
Yeah, and his ability was really good, right?
Selfishly, but yeah, he doesn't steal $30,000 from me.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, and I think it speaks volumes that I'm even saying this, because P5 is one of my favorite games ever, and so it's like, you know, the fact that I can't quite compare the two in that way is interesting to me and good. I think is a compliment ultimately.
Yeah, especially if I could, just because I think, you know, I really try to give this game its credit where it's due, knowing 5 is built off 4, that's built off 3, and the learnings there and all those sorts of things. And I do think at the end of the day you can compare something you like more later, that came later versus earlier. But I appreciate so much of what they did get right here, knowing that it, you know, a lot of it was back then. And the new stuff they added is great too. So
and that's also the new stuff, it seems like, is exceptionally impressive from everything I've heard while talking about this show. It seems like the Reload has just added a huge amount of value to this game, not to speak ill of the original or whatever.
Yeah, which
but
go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say, gives me a lot of hope for P6 to know that like that talent is hopefully moving on to that project.
Yeah, and then the other part of that was that oh god, what was I gonna say?
I made you lose your thought. You shouldn't have let me speak. That's what happens.
No, oh yeah. So the other part of that is that, to your point, I don't like it feels like a waste in terms of comparison. It feels like a waste to be like, well, I think P5 had the better gameplay, but P3, because it's like, of course P5 had an extra decade, right? And then a Reload version that made it all even better, Royal version that made it even better somehow, and it fixed gun stuff, and it fixed all these parts of it. So yeah, it doesn't feel like a useful exercise to compare them gameplay wise, like you said, because P5 is an evolution of what this game was doing, and there's just so many things about this game that are not going to stack up to what P5 did, just, you know, because it's like, this is going to sound stupid, but it's like looking at a chicken and then pointing at like a baby chick and being like, well, it makes better eggs than that one. And you're like, yeah, of course it does. It's not, it doesn't. What are you talking about, you idiot? Like,
that works. Yeah.
It's such growth, and it compounds on itself. And, you know, like I didn't mind Tartarus. This is another thing I wanted to talk about at some point is Tartarus is the thing that is criticized by so many people as like it's super repetitive. I talk about how the pace of this show, of playing with this show, messes with my perception of certain things in this game a lot in a negative way. I think probably it was beneficial to Tartarus.
Yeah.
The fact that I only had to go into Tartarus one night a month, right? And then I would take a long break, and then I would go play more like, you know, it wasn't like I was going to Tartarus multiple times an evening or a weekend. I was going once a month. So that probably was to its benefit, because it was repetitive, but I never got sick of it. I never got bored of it. I was always kind of happy to have a little time to jump in and fight some stuff. And those are just not comparable to Palace. That's not comparable to Palaces, and it shouldn't be. It isn't. You know, it's the nature of it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I will say I started to hit my limit maybe like 2/3 of the way through this playthrough. But granted, I had played this game twice in essentially a year's span. So, you know, I had my fill of Tartarus by that point, and I think that's okay. But similarly, my first run through, I didn't feel a slog of it, really.
And also, I guess to that point, the supposedly Reload helped with that repetition, right? It made it not fixed, but smoother. So who knows there?
On that note, I do feel like I know your answer, but we could just briefly, it feels like it makes sense to bring it in here. Sarah M. from the Patreon did ask us, do either of you plan to play New Game Plus? Despite knowing how to play Persona, I miss completing an insane amount of social links, so I'm tempted to go back for those. Does anything you had left hanging for you at this point feel like you want to do a New Game Plus, or are you like, you're good for now?
I think I'm good for now. I'm very glad that I was able to, with the exception of Hayase 10 and all of Hiraga, I was very glad, like, the social links and the social interactions were the main thing I wanted to see. So I feel like I'm good for now. Maybe one day I will go back and revisit it, but I'm not much of a New Game Plus guy in general. Like, the only time I've really done it in recent memory was P5 Royal. Mm-hmm. So, or maybe it was P5. I can't remember. I've beaten that game and I can't remember amount of times.
That's fair.
Maybe I didn't play New Game Plus. Maybe I just played base game and then Royal again. And I didn't do New Game Plus for that because that last Royal playthrough was for the show and I didn't want it to be messed up.
That was the same for me. I did another normal run, which was maybe a little foolish, but I didn't want my experience to be so divorced from yours with what carried over that I could have done a New Game Plus, but opted not to. So for now, I'm not planning to. I do need to go back and finish my Reaper fight. I have a save at like my final Tartarus night, and that's, I think, my last trophy. But in doing that, I will also be able to tackle a thing we just won't be able to discuss here, which is the secret boss of the game. There is a secret boss.
That's behind the door after you beat the Reaper. Is that the thing?
So it's, I believe the open conditions are if you beat the Reaper on your first playthrough, or it's available in New Game Plus, essentially.
Oh, it's just open.
I think so. But it essentially becomes your final request from Elizabeth opens up for that, and there is a secret boss you can fight. So if someone wants to go back who didn't know about that, that is there. I feel
now
like
I wanna.
I don't want to spoil it too, just in case there are people who want to go.
Can you do it on your final run, like while you're on the 31st? Can you just go back and do it?
I mean, theoretically, because it does let you teleport to any floor. I guess if there's probably some.
Someone let me know. Someone let me know if you're allowed to do the secret boss, to fight the Reaper and do the secret boss on the 31st of January. I'd love to know that.
I was also going to say, affectionately, there probably is one weirdo out there who decided for the final night they were going to start at floor 1 of Tartarus and go the entire way up to the end. Just one last go of every single floor.
Yeah. I mean, that would almost... The impressive... I feel like that would be impressive if you just have the SP items.
Yeah,
but maybe you can just get through the full first, 200 floors by just hitting auto battle.
You would think, yeah. It probably would be pretty easy. Anyway, just wanted to make sure we mentioned that for people who might want to go back and fight that particular boss. Yeah.
Is it story interesting or is it just gameplay interesting?
I mean, it's a little story interesting, I suppose. Like there is it is a character. So
it is Shinji.
He was the Reaper. I won't say who, but it's fun that it's there. It's not like without spoiling it, but there is a DLC in the episode, I guess DLC, a boss fight that was included in trailers for the DLC, so it's very well known, but it like obviously is a weird one in relation to this game. And if you don't know who I'm mentioning, I won't spoil it. But yeah.
I don't.
Okay, cool. Never mind.
Excited.
Lips are sealed.
They released trailers for episode I guess at some point, and I remember getting messages from you and at least 2 other people being like, do not watch that trailer.
Oh yeah, I did do that. I definitely, specifically for this trailer, I was like, don't watch this. I want this to be a surprise for you. I'm glad I didn't just ruin it myself. Let's get out of this convo.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about some social links. I'm glad that before we do that, will say I'm glad we touched back. I'm glad we sort of had a moment of self-reflection in all of that stuff. Obviously, there's going to be more of that to come, especially after the game actually finishes. We'll talk more about the ending specifically when that comes. But if there's anything y'all want to hear about, specifically in terms of my impressions on my first playthrough, Jonathan's on his second, anything like that, any specific pieces, we have time and we would love to answer questions over the next couple of weeks. So or if you have thoughts about what I just said and my kind of take and your response, your rebuttal, we'd love to hear any of that. We really want to, this is the last month of the Patreon and of the show for now, so we want to bring y'all into it if we can.
The last month Tom and I will ever talk.
That's true.
Yeah.
This is a very who are those guys? Those there was one partnership that they never talked outside of work.
Oh, I kind of know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's definitely happened a few times professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's me and you.
We just show up at the same time every week just by happenstance to record.
Yeah. No, okay. So let's do some social links. Let's start with Hayase because I didn't finish Hayase, but also I basically did.
Yeah.
I don't know. His story is one of those stories that felt like it got resolved at number 8 and then they just sort of had to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I can spoil a little bit, obviously, at this point, but the final...
Oh, please spoil the final one.
The final one is just you two having a meal and really a very, reflecting. He's leaving that day, and so this is kind of his final chance to catch up with you. He wanted to spend this meal with you, and it's just about your emotional connection and reflecting on how the competitiveness, but also bond that you two have had has really allowed him to grapple with what's going on in his personal life with his family, which is the bulk of his link.
I think I could have fully guessed that.
Yeah, you probably could have just said exactly what I said, and it would, it would have worked. But yeah, it's a sweet ending, but it is absolutely a very denouement kind of moment of just let's peter out here.
Let's start with this before we jump into Hayase specifically.
Yes.
They really just get rid of people when you get to rank 10. Bebe moves away. Hayase moves away. How many other people? Maya just disappears. Tanaka says, "Don't ever talk to me again." Mutatsu's like, "I'm gonna go." Kamiki straight dies.
Accidentally, yeah.
And anybody, the little girl moves away.
Yeah,
anybody who's not a school student, they find some convenient excuse to just get rid of them.
I mean, hey, it weirdly works here, I think, to some degree of... This is getting very philosophical and metaphorical all of a sudden, sorry. But if you think of this is a fictional location in Japan, whereas, obviously, like with P4, we have somewhere, or P5, excuse me, we have somewhere real that they were kind of situated in, obviously. There is almost like a bubble that creates, I feel like, especially with this being kind of an island situation. But it is also a port for everyone to kind of come into and figure out what their life's goal is. Like a lot of this game, too, going back to the theme stuff, is people figuring out their purpose and what they're meant to do. And the idea that people would not stay somewhere makes a lot of sense in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Anyway, that's my BS way of lending meaning to maybe somewhere it isn't.
No, I like, because it is a port, right? I do like that as a symbolic, whether it was intentional or not, this idea that people are coming and going from this place in a very, different parts of their lives, different times of their lives.
Man, maybe I should teach English. Sorry, not to cut you off. Anyway, go ahead.
Hayase. Specifically, this is the story of you meet him at this track meet. He's super good. He thinks you're pretty good too, so he wants you to be their rival with him, basically.
Yeah.
I like this story overall because the arc of it is that his mother at some point, I think is early on, collapses, faints, and suddenly he has to quit track so that he can just take care of the family because he has 4, I think, younger siblings and his dad has died. And so there's this, pressure on him to be the family, the caretaker of the family. And he doesn't have time for track anymore. And then he learns to take care of his family, take care of himself, push through these things, still do the things he wants to do. And interestingly, and I like this part, he does this track meet to get a scholarship, but can't afford school even with the scholarship. And so he just does it for himself. And he learns not to do these things, not to prove something, but to just sort of do it for himself to prove he can, not to prove that he can fix everything or whatever. And and then they move away, but he learns a lesson and he's done with track and he's comfortable with it. It's on his own terms. It's his choice, right? That's sort of the way he went, which again is another example of one of these story arcs where it didn't go where I thought it would. There is an easy path for him to go along of just pushing through it and then being taking a scholarship and going and running at school, and that's it, right? And that's not where it went. It's not the deepest one ever, but Hayase's a neat character. His struggle is really deep. It's way deeper than I thought it was, even if the arc itself is not wildly deep. He and who he is and what he's going through, his tragic backstory, to put it flippantly, is actually very interesting to me. And I came around on him. I didn't really care about him at the beginning, and I actually did enjoy every time I kind of got to check in with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, he comes in at a weird time, especially just the way the game is set up. I think we talked about this when it happened, but the track meet that you two meet at being this thing that's built up to in the game so much, and then it doesn't really matter.
Right.
It just kind of happens, but you do get this social link out of it, and I didn't have much expectation going in. But yeah, to your point, I think in the class of social links that are all about, you keep having these check-ins with this person who is dealing with a dramatic element of another person in their life outside of this one-on-one, and you're helping them through it. To your point, I think works really well, and I think is an interesting approach to like the idea of being a kid who needs to grow up really quickly and take on a lot of responsibility, but how do you also put yourself first and do something for the enjoyment for yourself, as you were saying with the track meet. So I like that, because that's a very sort of mature theme to tackle.
Yeah, and it's also similar to what we were talking about before. It's not in your face about death, but it is sort of every part of his life is informed by his mom being solo now, and that the ripple effects of that and the mental ripple effects of that, and that's, I think, quite interesting to me. Yeah, it's a good story. It's one I don't regret not prioritizing, if that makes sense. I don't think I needed to be prioritizing this one, but at the same time, I'm glad I ended up being able to get as far into it as I did.
Yeah.
It did just feel like one where there was a little bit of filler. You had some conversations with him where it was basically just like, again, nothing really happening, repeating the same things. By number 8, I think rank 8 was the one where he's like, yeah, my mom woke up and I'm going to do the track meet anyway and it'll be fine. And then 9 is him just being like, yeah, I won the track meet anyway, I'm leaving now. And so it was like at a certain point they sort of ran out of stuff, or they had to pad a little bit, which is a shame. But it was not as obvious or as bad as some of the ones I've seen, where like literally they would just recap the conversation from the previous rank and then move on.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it's definitely not a criticism we have levied at this game before, which I think is totally fair. And obviously Atlas continued to improve and refine that to the point where they just got rid of 2 meetings with a character in Metaphor, and it works much better.
Yeah, I think that was a very smart move in Metaphor.
Yeah, but even in this one, you also get, like, I would say we've also said the linked episodes, the new stuff with the gang is some of the best stuff in the game. And those are, if you think about it, sort of replacements for not having social links more with the group.
Yeah.
But there's only a few of them per character. And even when they repeat a little bit, like Akihiko's, there's still momentum and interesting new developments in each one of those, I think. So
yeah. If I had to add a Persona 6 wishlist item all of a sudden right now, I think it would be social links that don't all have the exact same number of conversations.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Even while I was playing Metaphor too, is like I could see some of these taking way less time just because we become faster friends.
Mechanically, they'd have to figure it out. It's not like an easy just plug and play solution or whatever, because it has other ramifications. And I think they'd have to very clearly telegraph how many somebody has at the start of their thing so that you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
But I think giving them the flexibility to use exactly as many story beats as they think they need per character to tell the story they want to tell would be really beneficial. And then also this isn't relevant specifically to P3, but for P5 and for Metaphor, sometimes you just get characters where very clearly the abilities that you're unlocking are just, they just don't know what they should give you, or they don't have anything interesting, or they don't know what pace they should be giving it at. And so I think if they just freed themselves from the idea that everyone has to be identical, you would end up getting better stories and more interesting unlock abilities per level up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be, I think, really interesting to explore what that also means about those dynamics for your character. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Let's stick with track and do Yuko.
Fair enough.
Yuko, her story is sort of a funny one. It's an out of left field a little bit one. There's those kids that want to do, they're like second graders, and the fourth graders have challenged them to a race. I don't remember the exact grades, but it's like that. And they want to get good at track, so they want to use the practice field or the practice track to get better. And then Yuko sort of inadvertently ends up coaching them and teaching them how to run really good. And then I think they don't win, right? But like one of the kids wins and then the other two lose. Basically, they do well enough that they impress the older kids.
Yeah.
And they credit Yuko and you with this for coaching them and for being partners in their coaching or whatever. And Yuko ultimately decides that she wants to go into teaching or coaching like that. She finds this passion for a thing she didn't really know what she wanted to do before, and now she wants to work with kids in this way, and that's neat growth, and you get this little contained arc of it. It's cute. It's a good friend arc too. I really liked, I think I said this before, I really liked this one as in the context of like you and a friend doing a thing with some local kids is it just a very nice little story.
Yeah, though I can also totally see how it started as the romantic one, because I think some of the dialogue that leans that way is also like, what do you think about kids before we're even dating? It's very like, how many would you want to have, is like, and if this is a romantic pairing that you like lead that character down, to me, they're the most like, oh, in 20 years, they have 3 kids in a picket fence. Like they would just be parents, like good old, like soccer mom and dad sort of thing. But no, I think it's a really great friendship, relationship, to your point.
It's also a good story of you don't have to pander to her.
Yes.
There's none of that going on.
Yeah, no, I think the two of them, the friendship that it asks for is not you're just being a yes man, or to your point, you're not leading them down a wrong path like you do with Kenji. It's I think a well-developed one, and to your point, it doesn't go where I necessarily expected it to, and it feels quite distinct from the other track related stories here, which is great because this is our third track related social link. So
a lot of track in this game.
I hate running.
I know, me too. But I liked that aspect of it for sure, that this idea that it was it didn't have to be like you talked about misleading. She even says that. I think she says, like, when she says, hey, do you like me, or are we just friends? If you just be like, oh, we're just friends, she'll be like, okay, well, be careful, man, because you can give someone the wrong idea.
It is a really good friendship.
It just feels very genuine. I don't know, it's just it's a good sort of vibe. The whole thing has good vibes.
She was definitely, of that initial batch of characters introduced to social links, I think probably my favorite. Like, I love the old couple in a sweet way, but this one I just was like, you seem like a cool character that was developed here, and I appreciate the way they took it.
Oh, and the not pandering thing, that's what I was going to talk about too. She actually, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, has some dialogue where if you choose the pandery option, she actually doesn't like it. You can be like, oh, well, what, and she'll be like, calm down. Like, what are you doing?
No,
knock it off.
There's a very good balance here. I really appreciate, I think, of the school-based friendships, this is probably the one that feels most like an authentic friendship outside of the C's group to me.
Yeah. So, not a ton more to talk about there.
No.
let's talk about Yukari, because this is the big one we have missed.
Yes.
As the last party member that we have not discussed here. This is, well, she's your girlfriend. You tell us about it.
Oh, why you gotta do that to me? Yeah, I think in terms of, obviously we've talked about the other like closest friends I guess you have in the game in terms of the members of C's that you do have social links with. This one is very much, I think, surprised me a little bit where it ended up going and focusing so much on Yukari's relationship with her mother. But again, I like the way that this explores, so many of these characters are exploring different facets of essentially losing a parent, losing both their parents, being an orphan, all those things. It kind of runs the gamut. And here you have one where obviously her dad's death is very intrinsic to the main game. And it does raise that question of like, oh, what's her relationship been like with her mom? Why is she okay just hanging out at this dorm and living there instead of being at home? So I did like that it explored that side of her life and what that relationship means to her. Because I do think that is a very real and unexplored, especially in games, relationship of a widowed parent and their child and how they exist together. And I just kind of related a lot to it, especially as someone who did go through that. I thought it did that exploration of stuff pretty well.
Yeah. And there's also interesting aspects of this story of, her, the crux of it is her not wanting to rely on other people, right?
Yeah.
Not wanting to be independent and kind of pushing people away inadvertently as a result of that, and her coming to terms with, understanding how to be okay relying on people occasionally like you. But there's also this other aspect of it with her mom getting remarried and her being mad about that, but then also the mom going to her for approval and her coming away with this idea of like, it shouldn't be about my approval, right? They should be in love. If they're in love, that's what matters. And so she goes through this is one of the storylines or one of these social links where it doesn't feel like there's not a lot of exposition in this one. Like, I think, so let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Fuka, I think, has neither exposition nor character growth. I think her character growth happens at like a burst at the end where she suddenly has, she's suddenly just sort of different, and her cooking stuff that led up to it was not very interesting to me. Mitsuru has a lot of exposition and a little bit of character growth where there's a lot of plot points that Mitsuru is discussing, and then similarly at the end she just sort of she comes to terms with how she's feeling and comes around, but it's sort of this one thing. Yukari, I think, is the flip. There's not a lot of exposition in her arc. Not a lot of stuff happens. There's not like a story as much that you like congruently follow. There is a little bit, but not quite as much.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of character exploration in here. There's a ton of her talking about how she feels, her talking about the things you're going through together, like almost getting mugged, right? Her figuring out what she wants from other people. That's the interesting stuff that's happening here. Is there's not a lot of actual quote unquote plot.
Yeah.
But what she goes through and how she changes by the end of it is really, really interesting.
Yeah, the emotionality of it is, for me, I think one of my favorites in the game. I'm with you in the sense of it is uneven in that sense of it's not really plot heavy or there's not a lot of information coming at you, but
that's fine.
It is, yeah. I like that they all feel different, and it works really well here. Forgetting that aspect of it.
Yeah, and I do also think it's to its credit. Like, I don't mean to rag on Fuka as much as it, maybe that came off, but to its credit, I do think it is impressive that all of these social links, at least with these characters, are not exceptionally formulaic, right? There is variety between them in the structure of them, in the story, and what's going on. Tanaka, as much crap as I give him, is so different than any other social link, and that's to some degree valuable, that they can make so many different variations of this rather than it being the same pattern every single time or the same rhythm every single time.
Yeah. And this is sort of weird because you can't really give the social link credit for this necessarily, but because the social link gets to explore what it does, I also really love the evolution of Yukari and Mitsuru's friendship throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just the fact that does take center stage, I appreciate. Then we do get something really personal on this end, and you can kind of wrap the growth of those characters into that story as you wish, which is nice. But yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
I think that's good.
Yes.
Let's leave it at that for now. We're going to come back. We're going to do something else next week that'll be a lot of fun, probably a tier listy thing. But let us know what you want to hear. And we've got some comments that we want to read off right now as well.
Yes, just a few over from Patreon. These are from the last few weeks, so forgive me, missed a few things. But Mitch over at the Patreon just said, side note of last week's episode, this one we were talking about the miracle of resurrection. Mitch said, I'm so glad you talked about and figured out that Chidori is optional. I saw the scene this week. I'm on New Game Plus, and I was like, I swear she was dead when I played the first time. Glad I wasn't crazy.
Yep.
And yes, to your point, it is tremendous how much that changes the results of the game.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's pretty crazy. Also, I forgot to grab this one, but Francis, also at the Patreon, just wanted to mention in terms of like boss battle stuff, they said they felt that the boss was actually pretty weak. They beat it on hard difficulty without much trouble during all 3 playthroughs. And I do agree. I think we were kind of at the point of like, it wasn't difficult. It just, you had to be smart about, especially once you key into its twist, it works nicely.
Yeah. I think that's definitely fair. It was not, it was not super challenging as long as you sort of understood the formula of saving theurgies and using those attacks and healing when you did. It was not a crazy hard fight or anything, but it was a interesting fight.
Yeah. And Programmer Sid actually chimed in there and said they were pretty sure the original was much more difficult and they made this one easier, but they may have like overcorrected in the nerf for some players, but that's fair.
Sure.
I think it's such a fun battle. I don't mind it not being that hard.
Yeah. I'm torn on that in terms of final boss battles. I don't think that they should be DPS checks all of the time.
That's fair. And then Mark left 2 comments, one that I did not include because while I don't think it spoils the end of the game, I think it's a really great thought that I'd like to come back to at the end of the game.
Ooh, okay.
So I just want to leave that one there because Mark put in quite a bit of work, grabbed some YouTube links and stuff, and just want to make sure that heard that one. And I think it's great, and we'll save it for next week. But Mark also did mention, since we were talking about the music last week, the track that plays during the next core fight is called Burn My Dread. There's actually a really cool Easter egg in the game's opening movie. When the MC turns on his MP3 player, you hear the first couple of notes from the version of Burn My Dread that plays during the original Persona 3 intro, which is really cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cute.
And John added on to that and said, another cool thing about Full Moon, Full Life is it incorporates the melody of the Burn My Dread verses in a very subtle way. It's those little pizzicato notes before the singing starts. It's very cute. And yeah, I think the fact that the Reload soundtrack is also in not just one for one of the original, like it's honoring the fact that there's a legacy there, I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't surprise me that this music is even better than I thought it was.
Yeah. No, it's great. I love it all. So yeah, thank you all for chiming in. Just wanted to make sure we covered off on some of that stuff as we continue through. Yeah.
So yeah, head on over to patreon.com/takeyourtime, youtube.com/Dornology, Dornology@gmail.com. I'm at Tom and Marks on socials. He's at JM Dornbush. Any of those places, let us know what you want us to talk about for the next few weeks. We're going to be taking lots of questions. We're going to be doing lots of things like this. We're going to be deep diving into stuff. And I'm excited to do it because it gives us a chance to reflect on this wonderful journey we have been on.
You could call this the rank 10 of our social link. The real reflection moment where they're just really looking back on things.
You could call it that.
Yes.
One could do that. Yes.
Thanks for the support there. Appreciate it.
Anyway, we will see you next week. And until then, annihilator.